Okay, hello everyone. This is just to say that we're two speakers today, and my name is Bente Meyer. I'm from here, from Aalborg University, from the ICT and Learning for Design lab that some of you may have visited yesterday, and this is my colleague Meyer.
And I'm located at the same research lab of ICT and Learning Designs, and we are colleagues. So I think I'll stop here for the presentation.
Okay, that was her part. So she's more senior than me, unfortunately. Anyway, the title of our talk is One Among Many, the iPad in Shifting Material Cultures of Learning. And the iPad One Among Many refers to the fact that there's a lot of excitement around or about the iPad, and this means that a lot of people in Denmark anyway look at the iPad as the sole and autonomous actor in educational change. And we want to look at it from a different perspective, because what we see when we go out into schools is that what's present in classrooms is not only iPads, but a lot of different resources. So we want to look at the networks in which the iPad acts, and we'll say more about that, but that's just to explain the title. So, as I said, there's a diversity of artifact or resources in classrooms, and in fact, when we look at the iPad, it also, as the device or in its use, refers to a lot of different other materials or resources that we use in education. This is what we is going to talk about. So my perspective on this is the classroom perspective, and you will be more on the design perspective. So what we see is the iPad is embedded in a culture of materials that we use in education. And for this we have a lot of different, as you can see, we're inspired by different theories. Active network theory is one, also semiotic and visual culture. So as I said, we have two perspectives. My project was a project that I'll tell you about now in a second, about inclusive learning and the use of iPads. And Meyer will say more about children's visual cultures and the development of the iBook TAVS, right? Yeah. Okay. So these are two different projects, but the perspective that we're working on is something that we're working with in a larger perspective. So we're trying to understand these perspectives on school subjects for a project that we're doing. So my project was about doing field work in a school in the west of Denmark. I was there for about a year. I did observations and interviews with students, teachers, and with the school leader. What I've done is mostly, what I'll do is mostly show you some pictures from the classroom, and as you can see from my pictures, the first things that's obvious when you go into the classroom is that there are lots of resources present. In fact, this is a very resourceful school, and what's interesting about teachers is in fact they have been used to being resourceful for lots of years. Usually, as you know, schools don't have a lot of money funding, so teachers are used to using the resources that are at hand. And this is very important with iPads, because iPads are at hand. The students at this school are used to go to computer labs, where they go to where the technology is, but now they have the iPads, they have the technology at hand. So the technology is where they are in the classroom, and they use it with all the other resources that they usually use. So usually when people talk about iPads, they think about iPads or other kinds of new technology in terms of an evolution. So when a new technology turns up, the other resources that we use are not necessary anymore. This is not what I see in my research. What I see is there an abundance of resources, and schools are very resourceful, and the iPad is only one among many in this resourcefulness. And as you can see, the classrooms are also different. Here on the right you see the biology room, where they have subject-specific resources that they use, for instance, the skeleton and the fox, you see. But of course they also have both the blackboard and the whiteboard, and books, pens, paper, and everything else. So this is an example of two ways of doing math. So as you can see, the students choose also from all these resources, and what I see is they combine and connect and compile the things that they use. So in fact, they are assembling their unique combination of materials, of which the iPad is one. So this is an emergent way of using materials to the students' own use, where it makes sense for the students. So this is actually two ways of doing math, where the students choose whether to use the iPad, for instance, in this case, or the calculator. So it's two different ways of connecting the resources at hand. This is another example of doing a poster in geography, where the students have a choice of doing the poster on the iPad or on paper. And then most of the students actually chose to do the paper poster, but they use the iPad, and as you can see, they combine individually and uniquely to use the iPad with the paper, and in this case, which is what I see very often, they translate from the screen onto the paper. So there are these processes, these circulations of materials, between which there are translations from one visual interface, which is the screen, onto the poster. In this case, the students are working with scaling in math, and they're using both cardboard and paper to understand what scaling and buildings are about in a mathematical and a historical perspective. And as you can see, they're using both Lego and pen and paper and cardboard, as I said, to combine and compile in understanding these issues. What is interesting, actually, there's not an evolution even in the way that students use the different resources, because some, as you can see in the pictures, choose to use the iPad, and others find that Lego is the thing that makes sense for them in their learning. So again, you have these very inclusive material culture, and you have the students choosing their own relationships or connections or links between these resources. So the iPad is not the central device that they use. It is part of a network of resources that they use, and within this network you have different modalities. You have written, you have visual material, and they translate between these materials for their learning. And one of the last things I'm going to say is about the issue of capturing what we see, that students do very much with their iPads, is they take pictures even of both of visual material but also written material. So that's again making links between different modalities which they then bring back to class or bring back home with them in order to study it. So this is in fact making a visual representation out of something that might be written. So again, you see these translations between modalities within this network of resources that students work with is quite interesting. And I would use the concept of bricolage. So they are bricolaging. They are putting together materials that are in fact that we see as separate, but that become intertwined in their work, in their learning. So again, you see it's not the iPad in itself that adds, it's a combination, it's the connections between both the paper and in fact all the technical devices and all the resources and materials they use for their learning.
Okay. I want to approach the iPad from the perspective of it actually being a digital artifact. And what I'm going to refer to is a project which was conducted by the Meyer University College in Aalborg. And they engaged with involving 4 schools in developing transforming, or rather say transforming a material book, namely this called TAVS, Silence, into an iBook. And what I'm going to talk about is how the children were involved in this development of the book. And the reason they started the project was that they wanted to reach those mainly boys who were not interested in literature and want to support their literature experience and appreciation. And what you see in this slide is actually some screenshots from how they choose to develop the book, the iBook, as a very narrow remediation, you might say, of the material book, and they want to make this iBook be a kind of a book, but also expand the area of experience that the children actually got when they engaged with it. I also should say that there was some framework around it, so the authors of this book was also involved in the development, so there were some limits to how far the children could come with suggestions of how this iBook should develop. But what I think was interesting about it was both is how they were actually kind of using their references to the iPad as an iPad from their leisure time activities, but also as an iPad for a learning resource, which they used in many ways similar to what they did in their leisure time. And then there of course was a whole universe of references to Japanese visual cultures which were very appealing to the students, but still, though it was a result of a global visual repertoire, it's also was also locally interpreted in the images of the book. So I just give you a selection of different manga experiences which I have come across through my investigation of how children in Denmark and children in Germany, European adolescents are using manga cultures, but in their own interpretation. And of course another part, and I have framed the drawings from the book, were appealing to the students because of the references to the fascination of Japanese warriors. There's also a scene in the book about kamikaze. So the children were familiar with this visual repertoire presented to them. Another example was this small cat symbol, which is a very interesting character to follow in the book, but I cannot do it here. But it was represented in this mixture of being a Danish children's book, a Japanese manga, Pokemon figure, and of course the drawings of the natural cat representation. So this was the kind of universe that the children actually were engaging with when they were experiencing this story about the boy named TAVS, who is living in a kind of transit between modern life in Denmark and modern life in Tokyo, because his parents are diplomats. So the book is trying to turn into a kind of global experience of being a modern child, and these references throughout the book has two sides. On the one side they are referring to the repertoires we already know from our leisure time, and at the same time they kind of transform these representations into a universe, a global universe, or a global experience of children engaging with a new field from the literary world, but at the same time a field that they already know from their leisure activities. So what I think is interesting about this is how this digital artifact can work as a material in some kind artifact within the field of how it's used in the classroom, and at the same time it kind of engages the children with experiences from their leisure time, and at the same time trying to transform this into a learning resource. So to sum up on this, we suggest that the change in learning with the iPad can be identified in the ways in which visual repertoires, and here we're both talking about how the visual repertoires in the project Bente presented, and where the iPad is a part of a material culture, but also the visual repertoire, which is referring to what is going on behind the interface in the culture on the internet and the leisure time experiences. So we see the iPad not just acting as an autonomous device, but also as this one both learning resource, but also a kind of artifact which the children adapt in the culture they are already engaging with. And then last point, that the iPad takes its role as a part of the situation in which it is embedded, and whether visual cultures is a kind of connection both in the physical space but also in the digital space. Would you like to? Okay, thank you.